Imagine a battle so brutal, so utterly consuming, that it literally transforms the trajectory of a world war, marking the beginning of an empire's irreversible decline. This isn't just history class stuff. It's a profound lesson in leadership, obsession, and, well, the devastating cost of war. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into Antony Beevor's seminal work, Stalingrad, The Fateful Siege, 1942-1943.
Yeah.
In this book, it's not just another historical account. It's really groundbreaking in how it combines rigorous historical research with, honestly, novelistic storytelling. It makes it incredibly accessible, but also profoundly informative.
Absolutely. And to really help us navigate the complexities of this pivotal book, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM. It's designed for, deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insights from Beevor's definitive work. The goal is for you to understand not just what happened in Stalingrad, but why it forever changed the world. We want to give you those aha moments, without the information overload.
And Beevor's book really chronicles this catastrophic battle, the one that truly transformed the trajectory of World War II. It happened between August 1942 and February 1943. This siege became the psychological turning point of the entire war. It really was. It was that moment Hitler's seemingly unstoppable advance, it reached its peak and began its inexorable retreat.
Yeah, the beginning of the end, really.
Exactly. And Beevor masterfully shows how Stalingrad, the city bearing Stalin's name, it evolved, didn't it? From just a strategic objective into this huge symbolic battleground that ultimately consumed over 1 million lives and, importantly, marked Hitler's very first major defeat in Europe.
So let's unpack how this obsession even started. Beevor opens his narrative with Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion back in June 41. He traces the Wehrmacht's initial stunning triumphs and then that famous stalemate right before Moscow.
Right, the first major hiccup.
Exactly. But here's where Beevor shows things getting really interesting. Hitler's ambitions, they didn't stop. He launches Operation Blue in June 42. Now, originally, this was aimed squarely at the Caucasus oil fields, vital resources.
Absolutely essential for the German war machine.
But Beevor meticulously documents how Hitler's strategic focus began to, dangerously shift. It morphed into this utter obsession with capturing the city named after his nemesis, Stalin.
Which really makes you think, doesn't it? How often do symbolic goals just override rational strategy in conflict? Beevor reveals the German Sixth Army, under General Paulus, initially advanced towards Stalingrad with a pretty limited objective.
Right, not taking the whole city at first.
No, not at all. It was about destroying its weapons factories and, crucially, securing the eastern flank along the Volga. But it's compelling how Beevor shows this precise tactical goal gradually transforming into Hitler's fixation. As Beevor puts it, the dangerous dreamer had turned to symbolic victory for compensation. That shift was critical and ultimately fatal.
So fast forward to August 1942. The German Sixth Army is at Stalingrad's outskirts. You think, okay, massive bombing campaign, soften the city up, make invasion easier.
Seems logical.
But Beevor unpacks this incredible paradox. The initial Luftwaffe bombing, which was meant to subdue Stalingrad, actually did the opposite in terms of defense. It turned the city into, quote, a wilderness of rubble and ruins.
Which ironically favored the defenders.
Exactly. Favored the defenders. Beevor uses this telling quote from a German officer. Stalingrad is no longer a town. Animals flee this hell. The hardest stones cannot bear it for long. Only men endure.
Can you even imagine? What a brutal, brutal description.
And it really drives home the sheer dehumanization of industrial warfare. And the Soviet commander, General Vasily Chukov, who led the 62nd Army defending the city, he developed this ingenious defensive strategy.
Tell us about that. Well, he used what Beevor calls breakwaters. These were basically strengthened buildings, key positions. They were designed to channel and fragment the German attacks, break them up as they tried to advance. And Beevor describes this horrifying, savage intimacy of the urban warfare.
Savage intimacy. Yeah.
Battles fought room by room. Sometimes German and Soviet soldiers occupied different floors of the same building. This chaos, this close quarters horror, it deeply disturbed the German generals. They felt they were losing control in this pulverized hellscape.
And so while all this incredibly brutal street fighting is happening and the world is watching, something else is going on behind the scenes.
Something massive.
Yeah, Beevor reveals Stalin and his top generals, Zhukov and Vasilevsky especially, were secretly prepping this huge operation, codename Uranus. And here's the key insight they had. the German flanks. They weren't held by elite German troops.
No, they were held by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian forces. Less equipped, lower morale often.
Exactly. And the Soviets realized that was the weak point, the perfect target for a massive encirclement.
And they pulled it off spectacularly. The November 19th, 1942, the Soviet counteroffensive launches. Catches the Germans completely, utterly unprepared. Beevor's account of this is gripping. The two Soviet pincers, these huge armored thrusts, they meet at Kalach on November 23rd.
Snapping the trap shut.
Precisely. Trapping the entire German Sixth Army. Around 300,000 men in what the Germans called a Kessel, a cauldron. And Beevor highlights this critical moment. Paulus immediately requests permission to break out, to retreat while they still could.
Makes sense.
Militarily, yes, but Hitler categorically refused, just said no. And that decision right there sealed the army's devastating fate.
What followed was just awful. The slow, agonizing disintegration of the Sixth Army. Goering, head of the Luftwaffe, had boasted he could supply the trapped army entirely by air.
Yeah, a promise he absolutely could not keep.
And even close. Beevor chronicles how catastrophically inadequate it was. The army needed something like 300 to 700 tons of supplies daily. They received far, far less, and under impossible Russian winter conditions.
-30, -40 degrees Celsius. Blizzards.
Unbelievable. Beevor includes these harrowing details: starvation, rampant disease, frostbite turning limbs black, suicide, just the slow, brutal disintegration of a modern army.
The end finally came on February 2nd, 1943. Field Marshal Paulus Hitler had promoted him at the last minute, hoping he wouldn't surrender, did surrender. Beevor notes 91,000 German soldiers emerged from the cellars and ruins, hands raised, the largest defeat in German military history up to that point.
After chronicling that horror, Beevor really shifts focus to what it all means for leadership. It's a powerful analysis. He uses Stalingrad as the sort of crucible to contrast the key figures. Paulus comes across as, well, tragic.
A capable staff officer, but not a field commander for this.
Right. Beevor describes him as utterly intimidated by Hitler, just unable to make those independent, decisive judgments when they were desperately needed. And then there's Hitler. Beevor portrays him as increasingly detached from reality, prioritizing the symbolic victory over any practical military objectives, a worrying sign of his mindset.
Definitely. But then you contrast that with the Soviet side. General Chukov, the defender of Stalingrad. Beevor paints him as determined, skilled, and ruthless. A leader who stayed right near the front lines, demanding his troops hug the German positions, hugging the enemy, they called it.
Reduced the effectiveness of German air power and artillery that way, didn't it?
Exactly. And even Stalin himself. Beevor shows an interesting evolution, from the paranoid dictator of 41 purging his officer corps, to a leader who, by Stalingrad, had learned, perhaps grudgingly, to actually trust his generals, like Zhukov and Vasilevsky. That adaptability was crucial, and something Hitler completely lacked by this point. His rigidity was fatal.
As we delve into these contrasting leadership styles and, frankly, their brutal consequences, it really is worth pausing. Just to consider the human element, the sheer scale of suffering in such an immense conflict, this kind of reflection, stepping back to think, is exactly what we aim to inspire with Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis specifically designed to encourage reflection and rational thought.
A good point to pause. Because returning to Beevor's themes, one of the most powerful is that dehumanization of modern warfare. He really explores how participants were transformed into, well, almost instruments of mechanized destruction.
Yeah, he talks about soldiers on both sides losing all sense of any other world.
Yeah.
Kept going by amphetamines or vodka.
Right. And the backdrop is the ruins of civilian life. The enemy becomes invisible, hidden in rubble, and the fighting occurs with that savage intimacy we mentioned. Does he give specific examples that bring that home?
Oh, absolutely. Beevor uses diaries and letters, accounts describing soldiers living in essentially a perpetual state of shock, barely sleeping, constantly scavenging for food, feeling completely cut off from their past lives. Their world was just rubble and the constant threat of unseen death. It's visceral.
And that ties into the broader point Beevor makes again and again, Hitler's fixation. How capturing the city, the symbol, transformed a limited tactical objective into this catastrophic strategic obsession.
It's a powerful example, isn't it, of how totalitarian regimes can prioritize ideological symbols over actual military pragmatism. A theme that echoes, unfortunately.
It really does. And Beevor doesn't let us forget the environment itself. He emphasizes how terrain and climate profoundly shaped the outcome. That rubble from the bombing, perfect defensive terrain for the Soviets.
Like the paradox we talked about.
And the brutal Russian winter, general winter, it just exposed German logistical weaknesses in the most devastating way possible. Plus the Volga River, it was a lifeline for the Soviet supplies. Reinforcements came across under fire. But for the Germans, it became this insurmountable barrier to their east. The environment was practically a combatant.
Looking at the bigger picture, Beevor positions Stalingrad as more than just a battle. He calls it the great Manichaean clash between Stalin and Hitler. He argues this battle determined future social systems and philosophies of history. A real ideological showdown.
Yeah, it embodied that struggle, didn't it, between Nazi racial imperialism and Soviet communist internationalism. The scale wasn't just military. It was deeply philosophical, ideological.
And the book is unflinching about the sheer brutality of the Eastern Front. Beevor stresses this was a fundamental departure from, let's say, conventional conduct in the West. He documents extensive war crimes, atrocities committed by both sides. Ideological hatred turned it into a war of extermination.
That's a crucial point. And Beevor provides grim evidence, like the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, executing around 13,500 of their own soldiers at Stalingrad.
13,500. For what?
Often for perceived cowardice, unauthorized retreat, sometimes just falling behind. It exemplifies this shocking level of internal brutalization alongside the external fight.
A war within a war. Just horrifying.
Which leads to another interesting tension Beevor explores throughout the book. Historical determinism versus human agency. You have these massive forces, industrialization, ideology, climate-shaping events, no doubt. But Beevor also shows how individual decisions by Hitler, Stalin, Paulus, Chukov were absolutely critical. They mattered immensely.
So it wasn't all just inevitable forces.
Not entirely. Agency played a huge role. And this connects to the limits of military power, too. The Wehrmacht, this seemingly invincible force, reached its culmination point at Stalingrad. It showed fundamental constraints, regardless of tactical skill. Even the best armies can be broken.
So how does Beevor manage to convey all this complexity, this horror, but make it so readable? What's his approach?
He uses what's called an analytical narrative. He builds the story chronologically, which creates natural tension, but he skillfully weaves in strategic analysis and context along the way. Critics noted it makes the book flow like a novel.
It really does. You get caught up in it.
Exactly. He starts broad with Barbarossa, then narrows the focus right down to the claustrophobic street fighting, then pulls back for the encirclement, and finally the devastating end. It's history told like a thriller, but with deep analysis.
And his research must have been immense.
Oh, incredible. Beevor combined deep archival work, including, crucially, newly opened Russian archives after the Soviet collapse, accessing things like NKVD reports on desertions, executions, German prisoner interrogations, plus countless private letters and diaries from both sides. He blends this with what reviewers called a soldier's understanding of war's realities. He served in the military, and that novelist's eye for the telling human detail.
And the book was a huge success, wasn't it? Critically acclaimed.
Absolutely massive. It won the first Samuel Johnson Prize, the Wolfson Prize for History, the Hawthornden Prize for Literature, all in 1999. Critics praised that unique blend of academic rigor with the storyteller's sensibility. The New York Times called it military history at its best.
Were there any criticisms?
There were some, particularly from some Russian critics who felt there was perhaps an anti-Soviet bias. They argued Beevor emphasized Soviet brutalities, like the NKVD executions, while perhaps dealing more briefly with German atrocities on the Eastern Front, which were systematic and vast. But even with those points raised, the overwhelming consensus was praise for its narrative power and accessibility.
And its impact. How did it change your understanding?
Fundamentally, really, especially in the West. Beevor himself noted how Western historians had, frankly, scandalously neglected the Eastern Front, partly due to Cold War secrecy and focus. His book helped establish Stalingrad's true significance as the war's turning point, challenging narratives often centered on D-Day or North Africa.
Right, correcting that historical imbalance.
Exactly. It highlighted the Soviet Union's absolutely decisive role in defeating Nazi Germany, something often marginalized before. And commercially, its huge success proved that serious, detailed military history could reach a massive audience. It wasn't just for specialists anymore.
So bringing it to today, what does Stalingrad through Beevor's lens mean for us now?
Well, Beevor makes it clear the lessons are still highly relevant. Think about urban warfare. Stalingrad was a masterclass in its horrors and complexities. Issues of operational reach, logistics, the limits of military power. These are perennial military concerns.
And the political dimension.
Absolutely. His analysis of how totalitarian regimes prioritize symbolic objectives over rational strategy, well, that offers profound perspectives on current geopolitical conflicts. Places where you see ideological considerations seeming to override pragmatic calculations, it's a sobering reminder that these dynamics, sadly, haven't disappeared. Some lessons remain painfully relevant.
Powerful thought.
Antony Beevor's Stalingrad really isn't just a book about a single battle. It's a profound examination of human endurance, yes, but also strategic folly, leadership failures, and the ultimate terrible price of totalitarian ambition. It truly challenges us to look beyond simplistic narratives and grapple with the brutal complexities of history.
And this kind of in-depth book analysis, the kind that inspires reflection and rational thought, is exactly what we strive for, not just here, but also on Mindful Moments and our other podcasts. For a truly in-depth book analysis, please click the link you see on screen. Subscribe, share this insightful discussion with others who might find it valuable. Consider purchasing the book itself via our link if you'd like to read it. And most importantly, always think critically about the information you consume.